this whole process of consulting the various stakeholders in the society as a whole is with a view to formulate clear-cut, stable and productive policies that would be instrumental in guiding Sri Lanka's future growth trajectory and the ultimate aim of achieving the highest prosperity. I would like right at the outset to clarify as to where we as a party stand on the type of system that we envisage. So first and foremost, I thank all the members who are present here for giving us the time. And today we came with an approach of being a listening post to your proposals. And I would first request all those who made submissions, if it pleases you, to put them into paper and to provide us with a concrete proposal as a consequence of this meeting. I think I heard certain phrases that were uttered here, which was music to my ears. Shared prosperity, growth with equity, giving good meaning to the word capitalism with a human face, which I don't think was the major objective when those vast tax reductions were given, and most of the stakeholders were jumping for joy and applauding without giving due credence to the consequences of a tax reduction which reduced GDP tax percentage from 12 to 8%, I believe. State earnings were reduced from 12 to 8% of GDP. So at least now, I think since we're in a bankrupt situation, and it has forced not some of us, all of us, to think in a manner as to how we extricate ourselves, how we come out of this problem. And I think it's very important that we make sure we go forth with inclusive growth, shared prosperity, and growth with equity. With that premise, I would like to state that we basically believe in the capitalist model as far as creating wealth is concerned. But we prioritize the aspects of social justice and fairness when it comes to the distribution of the pie. It was mentioned here about the 75-year history of Sri Lanka. But you have to understand, these performances of governments and opposition were all adjudicated upon by the electorate. For 75 years we did not have a dictatorship. For 75 years we had the democratic process in place. And to be very fair, I don't think, if you look at the major barometers of success, be it economic growth, living standards, child mortality reductions, maternal mortality reductions, the age of survival, how long you live, so on and so forth, there has definitely been an improvement. So this 75-year doomsday scenario, I must say, while I do agree in some aspects, when it comes to lack of equity and justice and fairness, I think by and large there have been progress. Of course, with regard to certain sectors such as education, consecutive governments have failed to reform the process in the midst of call for patriotism and so on and so forth. So we believe in promoting fundamental reform of all sectors of our society. Fundamental reform that will be led by the stakeholders, which includes us also. But it's a stakeholder-led approach, so that there's adequate support and legitimacy to the whole process. So I think submissions made by Mr. Hulangamu, Mr. Ganegoda, Mr. Supun Veerasinghe, Mr. Riyaz Shangani, Mr. Manjula De Silva, Mr. Nista, Mr. Rizvi Shahid, Shahara, I hope I didn't miss anybody. We take good note of your proposals and your suggestions, and we would like to ensure that the voice of the private sector is absorbed into the policy decision making process and the formulation of our policy. So basically speaking, we are going ahead with a program of humanitarian capitalism, but with adequate checks and balances to ensure social justice and fairness. And I think I heard it was mentioned that we should do it because it was forced upon us by the IMF. I don't think that is the way to go forward. We should do it because we believe in it and because we feel the necessity to do it. We will not raise our hands in approval just for the sake of stability and creating some sort of a comfort zone for a particular sector of society. We will not do that. We have to do right by everyone. Take, for example, the disastrous proposal of the government in the debt restructuring arena. The domestic debt restructuring was farcical. You basically left out the super rich, the private creditors, and the banking sector, and you put the total burden of domestic debt restructuring on the workers and their savings, on the social security funds. We will not stand for that type of partial decision making. The burden has to be shared in a proportionate manner. The well-off in society will have to take the burden and make the sacrifices necessary for the restructuring program. We all have to share it. It cannot be just put on the working people of Sri Lanka. So, in fact, we were the first, Messrs. Harsha, Iran, Kabir, and co. were the first to suggest that we should approach the IMF and go for a stabilization program. And we see major weaknesses in the package that was negotiated. There could have been a far better deal. I think this deal exhibits incompetence and lack of understanding of the aspirations and the views and opinions of the people of the country. We have to make sure that we carry the people. I do admit it's not an easy thing. It's very difficult. Any restructuring process that entails costs and externalities, it will be very unpopular. But we are willing to take the hard decisions as long as they could be legitimized. We must be able to gain some sort of acceptance in society. We cannot force things down the throat of the people in an arbitrary and dictatorial and authoritarian manner. I also believe that we hear the buzzword corruption vulnerabilities consistently uttered by IMF, World Bank and other institutions. But when it comes to having the various checks and balances that are necessary, the instruments that are necessary to control these activities of corruption and malpractices, we hear the word, we cannot force it upon the relevant authorities because of limitations of mandate. The word corruption vulnerabilities cannot just be utilized by institutions as buzzwords to satisfy some sort of an international audience. The corruption vulnerability issue has to be severely dealt with. And I think it's very important that we have a very open, accountable, responsible, transparent mechanism to examine the corrupt and malpractices and maladministration that has taken place in successive governments, and ensure that assets that were stolen are repatriated back to Sri Lanka, to the people of Sri Lanka, and utilized for the development of our country. So having said that, thank you very much for providing us with this opportunity, and I would also invite my colleagues and friends also to make their own remarks. By and large, this is something we consider to be a beginning of a process of consultation, which we hope and we will ensure that this consultative process takes place in a very proactive and constructive manner, both when in opposition and in government. We see that in government these consultative programs are primarily utilized as photo opportunities. Very little are used as policy inputs, but we want to move away from that and have a drastic change in the approach to government. We will give due value to your opinions. We will give the due position to your voice and voices, and please understand that we are here to listen to you all and also learn from you all. I mean, we don't consider to be experts at governance. We would like to learn from the various techniques, the various policy instruments that have made you all a success. I remember when UK was coming out of its economic crisis way back in the late 1970s. UK was known as the poor man of Europe. And after Prime Minister Callaghan's reign, when Margaret Thatcher came in, she brought in the head of Marks and Spencer's, Rayner, who was ultimately given a knighthood. He was called Lord Rayner. He was brought into government to establish efficiency units to ensure that there was a pruned public bureaucracy which gave the results, and there was bang per buck for the investment of the taxpayer on the bureaucracy. So we have a lot to learn from you. We have a lot to learn from your experiences, of your managerial techniques, and how you all have achieved prosperity, profits, and in some cases supernormal profits. And we would like to learn from these excellent case studies in your business practices. So it's a learning process. I hope this is a symbiotic process whereby we exchange ideas and ensure that the ultimate resultant would be sound policy outputs for the benefit of the country.